My name is Seraphina, and I am 28 years old. What I discovered in that sterile hospital room would shatter everything I believed about family loyalty forever. When my own sister chose her convenience over my life, refusing to call for help during my cardiac emergency, I thought I had reached rock bottom. But the doctor's revelation 3 days later would expose a web of family betrayal so twisted, so calculated, that it would transform me from the family doormat into someone capable of orchestrating the most satisfying revenge of my generation. Before we dive into this family drama that will leave you questioning everything about blood ties, let me ask where you are watching from today. If you are ready to witness how karma can strike back harder than anyone imagined, smash that like button and subscribe, because this story about family betrayal and sweet justice will have you on the edge of your seat until the very last word. The chest pain started during Sunday dinner at my parents' house, a tradition we had maintained religiously for 15 years. My sister Madison sat across from me, scrolling through her phone while our mother served her famous pot roast. The sharp, crushing sensation began as a whisper beneath my ribs, then exploded into something that felt like a freight train parking on my sternum. "Something is wrong," I gasped, dropping my fork with a clatter that seemed to echo through the dining room. "My chest feels like it is being crushed." Madison barely glanced up from her screen. "You are always so dramatic, Seraphina. Remember last month when you thought you had food poisoning and it was just gas?" The pain intensified, radiating down my left arm in waves that made me nauseous. I clutched the tablecloth, my knuckles white against the burgundy fabric. "This is different. Please, I need to get to the hospital." "Oh, come on." Madison rolled her eyes, finally setting down her phone. "You are probably just having anxiety again. You know how you get when work gets stressful." Our parents had stepped out to pick up dessert from the bakery, leaving us alone in the house. The irony was not lost on me that my medical emergency would happen during the 30 minutes they were gone. I tried to stand, but the room tilted dangerously, and I sank back into my chair. "Madison, I am serious. Call 911. Something is really wrong with my heart." "Stop overreacting," she snapped, her voice sharp with irritation. "I am not calling an ambulance for your panic attack. Do you know how embarrassing that would be when Mom and Dad get back? They will think I am completely irresponsible for not handling this myself." The words hit me like physical blows. My own sister, the person who had shared a bedroom with me for 16 years, who knew my every fear and dream, was refusing to help me during what felt like a life-threatening emergency. The pain in my chest was nothing compared to the ache spreading through my heart. "Please," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I have never felt anything like this before. I think I am having a heart attack." "You are 28 years old, Seraphina. Healthy 28-year-olds do not have heart attacks. You are being ridiculous." Madison returned to her phone, dismissing me entirely. I managed to call an Uber with shaking fingers, though the driver looked terrified when he saw my condition. The ride to the emergency room was a blur of chest pain, cold sweats, and the devastating realization that my sister cared more about avoiding inconvenience than potentially saving my life. The emergency room team took one look at me and rushed me straight to cardiac care. Electrocardiograms, blood tests, chest x-rays followed in rapid succession. The cardiologist, Dr. Harrison, was a kind man in his 50s who spoke with gentle authority. "Miss Seraphina, you have experienced what we call a myocardial infarction," he explained, his expression serious. "A heart attack. We caught it early enough to prevent permanent damage, but this was very real and very dangerous." The words echoed in my head. A real heart attack. At 28. Madison's voice replayed like a broken record. "Stop overreacting." But Dr. Harrison was not finished. 3 days into my recovery, he returned with my test results and a puzzled expression that would change everything. "I need to ask you some questions about your family medical history," he said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "Your blood work shows some unusual patterns, and your genetic markers indicate a rare hereditary condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy." I nodded, still processing the technical terms. This condition typically runs in families and usually manifests with warning signs throughout childhood and adolescence. Have you ever experienced chest pain, shortness of breath, or fainting spells before? Yes, I admitted. Since I was about 12. My family always said I was being dramatic or seeking attention. Madison used to make fun of me for being weak. Dr. Harrison's expression darkened. Miss Seraphina, this condition requires monitoring and medication to prevent exactly what happened to you. With proper care, episodes like this are entirely preventable. Has anyone in your family ever been tested for this condition? I do not think so. No one ever mentioned anything like that. He was quiet for a moment, consulting his notes. I am going to recommend genetic testing for your immediate family members. This condition has a 50% chance of being passed from parent to child. If you have it, there is a significant possibility that others in your family do too. The implications hit me slowly, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. If this was hereditary, if my symptoms had been real all along, then my family had spent 16 years dismissing legitimate medical concerns as attention-seeking behavior. But the real shock came when Dr. Harrison returned the next morning with my genetic counselor, Dr. Martinez. Seraphina, we need to discuss something unusual about your test results, Dr. Martinez began gently. The genetic testing revealed something unexpected. While you do carry the gene for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the pattern of inheritance does not match what we would expect given your family structure. I stared at them, not understanding. Simply put, if both your parents were your biological parents, and if either of them carried this gene, we would see different markers in your DNA. The results suggest that one of your parents is not your biological parent. The hospital room seemed to shrink around me. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place in it, began to crumble. Are you saying I am adopted? Not necessarily, Dr. Martinez said carefully. But the genetic evidence strongly suggests that either your mother or father is not your biological parent. Combined with the fact that this serious medical condition has gone undiagnosed and untreated for 16 years, despite clear symptoms, raises some concerning questions about your family's medical awareness. As I lay in that hospital bed, the pieces of my childhood began rearranging themselves into a horrifying new picture. The dismissive comments, the constant accusations of drama-seeking, the way Madison was always favored, the way my parents seemed to view my medical concerns as inconveniences rather than legitimate worries. What if it had not been ignorance at all? What if it had been something far more sinister? The revelation hit me with the force of a second heart attack. As I stared at the genetic counselor's report, my entire childhood rewrote itself before my eyes. Every dismissed symptom, every accusation of attention-seeking, every moment I was told to stop being so dramatic suddenly took on a darker meaning. I requested copies of all my medical records and began making phone calls. What I discovered over the next week, while recovering at home, painted a picture so disturbing that I had to read each piece of evidence multiple times to believe it. My first call was to Dr. Patricia Wells, our old family physician who had retired 5 years ago. She remembered me clearly. "Oh, Seraphina. I always wondered what happened to you. Your mother stopped bringing you in when you were about 13, said you were outgrowing your childhood ailments. Dr. Wells, do you remember me complaining about chest pain and shortness of breath?" "Of course, dear. I recommended cardiac testing multiple times. Your mother always said she would schedule it but never did. I even sent referral letters to specialists. When you stopped coming in, I assumed another doctor was handling your care." My hands trembled as I took notes. "Did you ever discuss this condition with my parents directly?" "Several times. I specifically told your mother that your symptoms could indicate a serious cardiac condition that runs in families. She assured me that there was no family history of heart problems, but I recommended testing anyway to be safe." The next call was to my high school nurse, Mrs. Rodriguez, who still worked at the school. "Seraphina Martinez." Her voice brightened. "I remember you. You came to my office so often with chest pain and breathing problems. I must have sent home 20 notes recommending you see a cardiologist. What happened to those notes?" "Your sister Madison usually picked you up when you felt sick. She always said she would give the notes to your parents, but I never heard back from them." After a while, I started calling your house directly, but your mother said you were just anxious and that they were handling it with your regular doctor. The pattern was becoming sickeningly clear. Every adult who had tried to help me had been systematically blocked by my family. I called the genetic testing company and requested an expedited paternity test. The results would take 2 weeks, but I already knew what they would reveal. The nurse who drew my blood looked confused when I listed my parents' names. "Ma'am, we will need samples from your parents to confirm paternity. Should we send collection kits to their address?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to handle this carefully." During my medical leave, I stayed in my apartment and began documenting everything. I created spreadsheets tracking every medical incident, every dismissive comment, every time my concerns had been minimized. The pattern was not just neglect, it was deliberate suppression of medical care. Madison called exactly once during my recovery. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her tone suggesting she was fulfilling an obligation rather than expressing genuine concern. "I am recovering from a heart attack, Madison. A real one." "Well, I am glad you're okay. Look, I hope you are not going to make a big deal about the other day. I was just trying to keep you calm." The audacity took my breath away. "You refused to call for help when I was having a cardiac emergency. You are being dramatic again, Seraphina. Everything worked out fine, did it not?" I hung up without another word. 2 weeks later, the paternity results arrived by certified mail. As I opened the envelope, my hands shook so violently I could barely read the words. But there it was, in black and white. The man I had called father for 28 years was not my biological parent. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I hired a private investigator named Marcus Chen. Within a week, he had traced my biological father to a man named David Torres, who lived 2 states away. More importantly, Marcus discovered that David Torres had a documented family history of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. His medical records, obtained through a genealogy DNA database, showed that he had been managing the condition with medication for over 30 years. "Miss Seraphina," Marcus explained during our meeting at a downtown coffee shop, "your biological father has been aware of this condition since he was 18 years old. If your mother knew who your real father was, she would have known about the genetic risk." The implications were staggering. My mother had not just neglected my medical care, she had actively concealed information that could have saved me from years of suffering and potentially prevented my heart attack entirely. But the most devastating discovery came last. Marcus had continued investigating and found something that made my blood run cold. "I discovered that your mother took out a life insurance policy on you when you turned 18, he said, sliding a document across the table. "A substantial policy. The beneficiary is listed as Madison Torres." Torres. My mother had given Madison the same last name as my biological father, even though she was supposedly my father's biological daughter. Nothing about my family made sense anymore. "There is more," Marcus continued. "Your sister Madison has been in contact with your biological father for years. I found email correspondence dating back to when you were 21. She has been updating him about your health issues, telling him that you were receiving proper medical care." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. Not only had my family neglected my medical needs, but they had actively deceived the one person who might have advocated for proper treatment. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy that spanned nearly 3 decades. My mother had concealed my paternity, suppressed my medical care, and taken out life insurance on me. Madison had been complicit, actively participating in the deception while maintaining contact with my biological father behind my back. They had not just been negligent. They had been hoping I would die. The realization should have broken me, but instead, something cold and calculating settled over my mind. I had spent my entire life being the accommodating daughter, the understanding sister, the family peacekeeper. I had absorbed their criticism, internalized their dismissal, and nearly died because of their malicious neglect. But I was still alive. And now I knew the truth. It was time for my family to face the consequences of their choices. The transformation from victim to strategist happened overnight. I woke up the morning after receiving Marcus's final report with a clarity I had never experienced before. For 28 years, I had been playing a game where I did not know the rules, fighting battles I did not know I was in. Now, with the truth laid bare before me, I could finally play to win. My first call was to David Torres, my biological father. "Hello, Mr. Torres. My name is Seraphina. I believe you're my father." The silence stretched for so long I thought he had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Seraphina? Oh my God. I have been trying to find you for 28 years. The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. David Torres was a successful architect who had been in love with my mother during college. When she disappeared without explanation, he had spent years searching for her, not knowing she was pregnant. "Madison has been sending me updates about you," he admitted. "But she told me you were healthy and happy, that you did not want contact with me. She said you knew about me but preferred your current family situation." "David," I said carefully, "I just learned you existed 2 weeks ago. And I have been suffering from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy my entire life without proper treatment." The silence that followed was deafening. "That is impossible," he whispered. "I told Madison about the condition years ago. I begged her to make sure you were being monitored. She assured me you were seeing a cardiologist regularly." Another layer of betrayal, another carefully constructed lie. Madison had not just been complicit, she had been the orchestrator, manipulating both me and my biological father while positioning herself to benefit from my potential death. "I need you to do something for me," I told David. "I need you to keep talking to Madison as if nothing has changed. Do not tell her we have spoken." "What are you planning?" "Justice." My next ally was unexpected. Dr. Harrison, my cardiologist, was appalled when I shared the full scope of my family's medical neglect. As a mandated reporter, he was legally obligated to document potential medical abuse, especially given the life insurance policy and the systematic suppression of care. "This is not just malpractice by proxy," he explained during our follow-up appointment. "This constitutes deliberate endangerment. The fact that they had genetic information and withheld it while you experienced cardiac episodes could be considered attempted murder in some jurisdictions." He connected me with Dr. Sarah Kim, a physician who specialized in cases of medical abuse and neglect. Dr. Kim had testified in dozens of cases where family members had deliberately withheld medical care for financial gain. "Your case is particularly strong," she explained during our consultation. The combination of genetic evidence, documented symptoms, multiple medical professionals who recommended cardiac care, and the life insurance policy creates a clear pattern of intentional harm. But I needed more than medical testimony. I needed legal firepower. Marcus Chin introduced me to his sister-in-law, Elena Vasquez, a prosecutor who had built her career on complex family fraud cases. Elena was a small woman with steel in her eyes and a reputation for taking down people who exploited family relationships for personal gain. "This is one of the most calculated cases I have seen," she said after reviewing my evidence. The insurance policy alone would be grounds for investigation, but combined with the medical suppression and the biological father deception, this is a clear case of conspiracy to commit fraud and endangerment. Elena explained that criminal charges would take time to build, but there were immediate civil options available. "We can file for guardianship fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and medical neglect," she outlined. "But more importantly, we can freeze the life insurance policy immediately and initiate a full investigation into their financial activities." My biological father, David, proved to be an unexpected asset in building the case. As an architect, he was methodical and detail-oriented. He had kept every email from Madison, every update about my supposed well-being, every lie she had told about my medical care. "She told me last year that you were engaged to a cardiologist," he said, showing me printed emails. "She said your fiancé was managing your heart condition and that you were doing wonderfully." The lies were so elaborate, so carefully maintained, that they revealed a level of premeditation that chilled me to the bone. But the most powerful ally came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez, my old high school nurse, had kept copies of every note she had sent home about my medical concerns. When I contacted her and explained the situation, she was eager to help. "I have been a school nurse for 32 years, she told me, and I have never forgotten about you. Your case haunted me because I knew something was wrong, but I was powerless to help when your family blocked every attempt at intervention." She connected me with Dr. Amanda Foster, a pediatric cardiologist who had tried to see me when I was 15. Dr. Foster had actually spoken directly with my mother. I remember that conversation clearly. Dr. Foster told me during a phone interview, "Your mother was hostile and defensive. She accused me of trying to scare her into unnecessary treatments. When I offered to see you at no charge through a research study, she became angry and said she would handle your care herself." The research study detail was new information. My mother had not just refused standard care, she had refused free care from a leading specialist. As the evidence mounted, I realized I had enough allies to not just expose my family's crimes, but to ensure they faced real consequences. Dr. Harrison could testify about the medical neglect. Dr. Kim could explain the pattern of abuse. Elena could prosecute the fraud. David could provide evidence of Madison's deception. Mrs. Rodriguez and Dr. Foster could document the systematic blocking of medical care. But I wanted more than justice through the courts. I wanted the satisfaction of watching their carefully constructed lies collapse in real time. I wanted them to experience the same helplessness I had felt when my own sister refused to call for help during my cardiac emergency. The plan that formed in my mind was elegant in its simplicity. I would use their own deceptions against them, turning Madison's lies and my mother's secrets into weapons that would destroy them both. The first phase would be a family dinner, just like the one where I had nearly died. But this time, I would be the one controlling the narrative. I called my mother and suggested we have a family meal to put the medical scare behind us and move forward as a family. She was enthusiastic about the idea, probably relieved that I seemed to be returning to my old, accommodating self. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," she said. "Madison will be so happy to hear you are not holding grudges about the misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. The word made my teeth clench, but I kept my voice sweet. "Of course not, Mom. Family is family, right?" As I hung up the phone, I felt something I had never experienced before. The cold satisfaction of knowing that justice was coming. My family had spent 3 decades believing they could manipulate and endanger me without consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Are you ready to see how this calculated revenge unfolds? Because what happens next will show you exactly why karma never forgets an address, especially when it comes to family betrayals that almost cost someone their life. The confrontation that is coming will leave everyone speechless. What would you do if you discovered your family had been lying about your medical care for decades? Let me know in the comments, and if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button so I know you want to hear how this family revenge story reaches its explosive conclusion. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt like stepping into a perfectly preserved crime scene. The same burgundy tablecloth, the same chairs, even the same floral centerpiece that had witnessed my near-death experience 3 weeks earlier. But this time, I was not the helpless victim clutching her chest in agony. I arrived early, ostensibly to help with preparations, but actually to set up the recording equipment Elena had provided. Tiny cameras disguised as decorative items were strategically placed around the dining room. Everything that happened tonight would be documented in high definition. "Seraphina, you look so much better," my mother gushed, embracing me with what I now recognized as performative affection. "I was so worried about you." "Were you?" I asked, studying her face carefully. "I have been thinking a lot about that night, Mom. About how everything unfolded." Madison arrived fashionably late, breezing in with her usual self-centered energy. She hugged me briefly, her embrace feeling more like a social obligation than genuine warmth. "How are you feeling, sis?" "All better now. Actually, I wanted to talk to both of you about what the doctors discovered," I said, settling into my chair. "It turns out I have a genetic condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy." I watched their faces carefully. Mom's expression flickered with something that might have been guilt before settling into concerned confusion. Madison looked genuinely surprised, which was interesting given her extensive correspondence with David. "What does that mean?" Madison asked. "It means I have been having real cardiac episodes since I was 12 years old," I said slowly. "It means every time you called me dramatic or attention-seeking, I was actually experiencing symptoms of a potentially fatal heart condition." Mom reached across the table to pat my hand. "Honey, we had no way of knowing. You never said it was that serious." "Did I not?" I pulled out my phone and began reading from my notes. March 15th, 2008. "I told you my chest felt like it was being stabbed and I could not breathe. You said I was being theatrical." September 3rd, 2010. "I collapsed during gym class and you picked me up from the nurse's office. You told Mrs. Rodriguez I was just trying to get out of running laps." Madison shifted uncomfortably. "You are remembering things differently than they happened." "Am I?" "Because I spoke to Mrs. Rodriguez last week. She kept copies of every note she sent home recommending cardiac evaluation. 27 notes over 4 years, Madison. Did any of those notes make it to Mom and Dad?" The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. "I also spoke to Dr. Wells, our old family doctor. She recommended cardiac testing multiple times." "Mom, you told her you would schedule the appointments, but you never did." "I do not remember that," Mom said quickly. "And Dr. Patricia Foster, the pediatric cardiologist who offered to see me for free through a research study when I was 15. You not only refused the appointment, Mom, you became hostile and accused her of trying to scare you into unnecessary treatments." Mom's face had gone pale. "I was trying to protect you from medical anxiety. Were you protecting me? Or were you protecting yourself?" I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the way they both tensed. Because I discovered something interesting about my medical history. I placed the genetic testing results on the table like a royal flush. It turns out this condition is hereditary. And the pattern of inheritance indicates that one of my parents is not my biological parent. Mom knocked over her water glass, the liquid spreading across the table like spilled blood. Madison frantically grabbed napkins, but her hands were shaking. "I do not understand what you are suggesting," Mom said, but her voice had lost all its warmth. "I think you understand perfectly. I found my biological father, Mom. David Torres. Remember him?" The name hit her like a physical blow. She actually recoiled in her chair. "He has been managing hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with medication for 30 years. If you had told me who my real father was, if you had been honest about my genetics, my condition could have been diagnosed and treated before I ever had a heart attack." "Seraphina, you do not understand the situation," Mom began, but I cut her off. "Oh, but I do understand. I understand that you took out a life insurance policy on me when I turned 18. A policy worth $500,000 with Madison as the beneficiary." Madison dropped the napkin she was holding. "How did you find out about that?" The question hung in the air like a confession. "So you admit it exists," I said calmly. "Were you planning to tell me about it? Or were you just hoping I would die before I discovered it?" "That is not what happened," Madison said quickly. "The insurance was for protection, in case something happened to you." "Protection for whom?" "Because from where I sit, it looks like you and Mom had a financial incentive to make sure I did not receive proper medical care." I pulled out printed emails from my bag. "These are correspondence between you and David Torres, Madison. Years of emails where you told him I was healthy and happy, that I was receiving excellent cardiac care, that I did not want contact with him." Madison's face crumpled as she recognized the documents. "You lied to him about my condition while lying to me about his existence. You positioned yourself as the caring sister keeping us apart for my own good, when actually you were preventing him from advocating for my medical care." "You do not understand," Madison whispered. "Then explain it to me. Explain why you refused to call 911 when I was having a heart attack. Explain why you have been lying to my biological father for 7 years. Explain why there is life insurance on me that I never knew about." Mom finally found her voice. "We were trying to protect the family." "Whose family?" "Because I am starting to think I was never really part of this family at all." The truth was spilling out now, ugly and unstoppable. Madison began crying, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of someone caught in an elaborate lie. It started as a mistake, Mom said finally. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought the baby was your father's. When you started having medical problems, I realized you might be David's daughter, but by then it was too late to tell the truth. So you decided to let me suffer instead. We did not think you would actually die, Madison said desperately. We thought you were just anxious, that you would outgrow it. Even after doctors recommended cardiac testing? Even after I collapsed multiple times? Even when I begged you to take my symptoms seriously? They had no answer for that because there was no good answer. They had gambled with my life and lost. Well, I said, standing up from the table, I have some news that might interest you. I filed a police report yesterday for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and medical neglect. I also filed a civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and guardianship fraud. The color drained from both their faces. The insurance policy has been frozen pending investigation. And David Torres is flying in tomorrow to give his testimony about Madison's deception. I gathered my things, leaving the evidence scattered across the table like the remains of their shattered lies. Dinner was lovely, I said. Let me know how the legal proceedings work out for you. As I walked toward the door, Madison called after me desperately. Seraphina, we are family. You cannot do this to your own family. I turned back one last time. You are right, Madison. I would never do this to my own family. But you stopped being my family the moment you chose money over my life. The legal avalanche began 48 hours after the dinner confrontation. Elena had warned me that once the investigation started, everything would happen quickly, but even I was unprepared for how thoroughly my family's world would collapse. The first domino fell when the insurance company launched their own investigation. Apparently, life insurance fraud was taken very seriously, especially when combined with medical neglect. Within 24 hours, they had frozen not just my policy, but all of Mom and Madison's financial accounts pending review. Madison called me 17 times that first day. I answered on the 18th call. Seraphina, please, you have to stop this, she sobbed into the phone. They froze my accounts. I cannot even access my own money. Interesting, I said calmly. How does it feel to be helpless while someone else controls your access to basic necessities? This is different. I never tried to hurt you. You refused to call for help when I was having a heart attack, Madison. You systematically deceived my biological father about my medical condition. You positioned yourself to benefit financially from my death. How is that not trying to hurt me? The silence stretched until I heard her crying again. I never thought you would actually die. But you were willing to risk it, were you not? For $500,000, you were willing to gamble with my life. She hung up without another word. Mom's response was more calculated. She hired a lawyer within hours of the investigation beginning, but it was too late to contain the damage. The evidence was overwhelming, and her attorney seemed to understand that damage control was the only viable strategy. David Torres arrived as promised, and meeting him in person was surreal. I looked like him. Not just features, but mannerisms, the way he tilted his head when thinking, even his laugh. 28 years of wondering why I felt like an outsider in my own family suddenly made perfect sense. I cannot believe they kept you from me for so long, he said over coffee at my apartment. When Madison told me you were thriving and did not want contact, it broke my heart, but I respected what I thought were your wishes. She told you I was receiving cardiac care regularly. She said you had an excellent cardiologist and that your condition was well managed. She even sent me fake updates about your medications and treatment plans. The depth of Madison's deception was staggering. She had not just lied, she had created an elaborate fantasy medical history to keep David at bay while ensuring I remained untreated. There is something else, David said carefully. Madison asked me for money several times over the years. She said it was for your medical expenses, that your insurance did not cover everything. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. How much money? About $15,000 over 5 years. I was happy to help with my daughter's medical care. Madison had been profiting from my condition in multiple ways. The life insurance policy if I died, ongoing financial support from David based on fabricated medical expenses, and probably other schemes I had not discovered yet. The criminal investigation moved forward with frightening efficiency. Detective Seraphina, who specialized in family fraud cases, explained that the evidence was unusually comprehensive. Most family fraud cases rely on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony, she told me during our interview. Your case has documented medical neglect, insurance fraud, multiple forms of deception, and clear financial motivation. This is a prosecutor's dream. The charges came down 3 weeks later. Mom was charged with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, child endangerment, and medical neglect. Madison faced the same charges plus additional counts of wire fraud for her ongoing deception of David. But the criminal charges were just the beginning. The civil lawsuit Elena filed was seeking damages for a lifetime of medical neglect, emotional distress, and the financial exploitation of my biological father. The dollar amounts being discussed were staggering. Your case has attracted attention from medical malpractice specialists across the country, Elena explained. Family-based medical neglect is rare, but when it happens, the damages can be enormous. We are looking at potentially millions in compensation. The media attention was unexpected but satisfying. A local investigative reporter picked up the story, and it quickly went viral. Local woman nearly dies after family refuses medical care for insurance money was the headline that started appearing everywhere. The comment sections were filled with outrage on my behalf and disgust at my family's actions. For the first time in my life, I was experiencing what it felt like to have strangers validate my experiences instead of dismissing them. Madison lost her job when the story broke. Apparently, her employer felt that someone capable of such elaborate deception could not be trusted in a customer-facing role. Mom's part-time bookkeeping clients began dropping her as well, unwilling to trust their finances to someone under investigation for fraud. The man I had called Dad throughout my childhood reached out through his attorney. He wanted me to know that he had been completely unaware of my true parentage and was shocked by the medical neglect. He was also filing for divorce and offering to testify on my behalf. I thought I was protecting my daughter all these years, his message said. I had no idea I was enabling abuse of someone else's daughter. Even he could see what my family had refused to acknowledge, that their treatment of me had been abusive. The house where I had grown up, the scene of so many dismissed medical episodes and family dinners that ended in accusations of drama, was put up for sale to pay legal fees. Mom and Madison were hemorrhaging money between attorney costs, frozen accounts, and lost income. Dr. Harrison kept me updated on my medical progress, but also served as an expert witness in the criminal case. His testimony about the severity of my condition and the consequences of untreated hypertrophic cardiomyopathy was devastating to their defense. In 30 years of cardiology practice, he testified, I have never seen such a clear case of medical neglect with such potentially fatal consequences. The fact that genetic information was deliberately concealed makes this particularly egregious. 3 months after that final family dinner, Madison's attorney approached Elena about a plea deal. They wanted to avoid trial, willing to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for cooperation in the case against Mom. Madison was ready to throw our mother under the bus to save herself. She wants to testify that your mother orchestrated everything, Elena told me. According to her proposed testimony, your mother knew about David from the beginning and deliberately concealed your paternity to avoid child support obligations. The insurance policy and medical neglect were supposedly Mom's ideas. I almost laughed at the irony. The sister who had refused to help me during a medical emergency was now desperate for my help avoiding prison. The family loyalty she had preached for years evaporated the moment her own freedom was at stake. What do you think? Elena asked. I think Madison is about to learn that actions have consequences, I said. And I think our mother is about to discover what it feels like when family betrays you. The plea hearing was scheduled for the following month. My family's perfect facade had crumbled completely, replaced by a messy reality of criminal charges, financial ruin, and mutual betrayal. Justice was not just being served. It was being served ice cold. 1 year later, I stood in the courthouse lobby holding a check for $2.7 million. The civil lawsuit had exceeded even Elena's optimistic projections, with the jury awarding punitive damages that sent a clear message about family-based medical abuse. Madison had testified against Mom in exchange for a reduced sentence of 2 years probation and community service. Mom received 5 years in prison for conspiracy and child endangerment. But the money was not what mattered most. What mattered was the validation, the official acknowledgement that what had happened to me was wrong, criminal, and inexcusable. David walked beside me as we left the courthouse, our relationship having grown from strangers to genuine family over the past year. He had moved across the state to be closer, eager to make up for lost time with the daughter he had never known he had. "How does it feel?" he asked as we stepped into the afternoon sunshine. "Like I can finally breathe," I said, and meant it literally. My cardiac condition was now well managed with medication and regular monitoring. The chest pain that had plagued me for 16 years was gone, replaced by the steady, reliable rhythm of a healthy heart. Dr. Harrison had become more than my cardiologist. He had become an advocate and friend. At my 1-year cardiac follow-up, he had marveled at my improvement. "Your heart function has improved dramatically since you started proper treatment," he told me. "If you had received this care as a child, you might never have experienced any symptoms at all." The words should have filled me with anger about lost years, but instead they filled me with gratitude for found time. Every day without chest pain was a gift. Every normal heartbeat was a victory over the family that had tried to suppress my health for their financial gain. My relationship with David had healed wounds I had not even known I carried. Having a parent who took my medical concerns seriously, who drove me to appointments without complaint, who celebrated my health improvements as victories rather than inconveniences, showed me what family support was supposed to feel like. "I keep thinking about all the birthdays I missed," he told me during one of our weekly dinners. "All the times you needed a father, and I was not there because I did not even know you existed. You are here now," I reminded him. "That is what matters." We had started a foundation together using part of the settlement money. The Torres Foundation for Medical Advocacy focused on helping children whose families were neglecting or suppressing their medical care. David's architectural skills combined with my lived experience created programs that trained teachers, coaches, and community members to recognize signs of medical neglect. Mrs. Rodriguez, my old high school nurse, became our first board member. "Your case taught me that sometimes family members are not advocates," she said during our first board meeting. "Sometimes they are the obstacle preventing children from getting help." The foundation had already helped 12 children receive proper medical care despite family resistance. Each case reminded me that my suffering had not been meaningless if it could prevent other children from experiencing the same neglect. Madison had tried to contact me several times during her probation period. Her letters, which I read but never answered, followed a predictable pattern of self-pity and requests for forgiveness that focused more on her consequences than my suffering. "I know I made mistakes," she wrote in her latest letter, "but I never meant for you to get hurt. I hope someday you can forgive me and we can be a family again." The delusion was breathtaking. After years of deliberate deception, medical suppression, and financial exploitation, she still saw herself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of my suffering. Mom's letters from prison followed a similar theme, filled with justifications and requests for understanding. She maintained that she had been protecting the family, that she had never intended for me to be seriously hurt, that my biological father would have disrupted our happy home. I kept their letters in a file labeled Evidence of Continued Delusion, but never responded. Some bridges were not meant to be rebuilt. My real family now consisted of David, Dr. Harrison, Elena, Marcus Chin, and his wife Lisa, Mrs. Rodriguez, and a growing circle of foundation supporters who understood that family was about choice and care rather than biology and obligation. Lisa Chin had become my closest friend, someone who understood the complex emotions of rebuilding your life after family betrayal. Her own story of escaping a manipulative family had created an instant bond between us. "The hardest part is not the anger," she told me during one of our hiking trips. It is learning to trust your own judgment again after years of being told your perceptions were wrong. She was right. Learning to trust my instincts, to believe my own experiences, to advocate for my own needs without apologizing had been a longer journey than the legal proceedings. But I had learned. When chest pain returned briefly during a stressful work period, I immediately called Dr. Harrison without hesitation or self-doubt. When my new cardiologist recommended additional testing, I scheduled it without questioning whether I was being dramatic. When people in my life showed signs of minimizing my concerns, I set boundaries immediately rather than accepting their dismissal. My apartment was filled with photos now. Pictures of David and me at foundation events, hiking trips with Lisa, dinner parties with Elena and her family, holiday celebrations with my chosen family. The walls that had once been bare, reflecting my isolation, now showcased connections built on honesty and mutual respect. The Foundation's latest project was creating educational materials for emergency room staff about family-induced medical delays. Too many medical professionals, we had learned, assumed that family members arriving with patients were advocates rather than potential obstacles to care. Your case is being studied in medical schools now, Dr. Harrison told me proudly. Students are learning to recognize signs of family-based medical abuse and to take patient concerns seriously even when family members dismiss them. Legacy mattered. If my years of suffering could prevent other children from experiencing similar neglect, if my story could train doctors to better recognize family-induced medical abuse, if my foundation could help even one child receive proper care despite family resistance, then perhaps the pain had served a purpose. Standing in my apartment one evening, looking at photos of my chosen family and reading reports about children the foundation had helped, I realized something profound. I was not just surviving anymore. I was thriving. My heart beat steady and strong, supported by proper medication and regular care. My career was flourishing, no longer interrupted by mysterious health episodes. My relationships were built on honesty and mutual support rather than obligation and manipulation. The family that had tried to suppress my voice, dismiss my needs, and profit from my suffering had been replaced by people who celebrated my strength, supported my health, and invested in my future. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destruction, but transformation. Not just surviving what they tried to do to you, but building something beautiful from the ashes of their betrayal. I had learned that family was not about blood or obligation. It was about showing up, caring genuinely, and fighting for each other when it mattered most. And my real family? They had never once told me I was overreacting. They had learned, as I had, that when someone you love says they are in pain, you believe them. You help them. You fight for them. That, I had discovered, was what real family looked like. Have you ever had to choose between blood family and the people who actually treat you with love and respect? Sometimes the hardest lesson is learning that DNA does not guarantee loyalty, and that the family we choose can be stronger than the family we are born into. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have been able to walk away from people who shared your last name but not your best interests? If this story about family karma and finding your real tribe resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you had to set boundaries with family members who did not have your best interests at heart? Hit that like button if you believe justice was served. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who fought back against family betrayal. And share this with anyone who needs to know that sometimes walking away from toxic family is the healthiest choice you can make. Thank you for joining me on this journey from medical emergency to family revelation to hard-won justice. Remember that your voice matters, your pain is valid, and you deserve people in your life who will fight for your well-being rather than profit from your suffering. Until next time, keep choosing the family that chooses you back.